that God ultimately always has the final voice in whatever you're looking to bring forth change and correction about. They look like they're a bit overwhelmed right now.
We're almost done.
Okay, all right.
We're almost done. We're just going to finish the scripture with a few other comments. And then what we are going to do is, if we're all still alive and kicking tomorrow night, we intended to pray for you if you wanted to be prayed for. To bless your unions, to bless your marriages, to minister to you, however the Lord thought that was a good thing. So I'll know if you're all here in the morning, but you don't come back tomorrow night. I'll know that my government has had a vote of no confidence. You do what you need to do, for sure. Becoming one flesh is both easier and harder now than it's ever been. It's harder because it goes right to the fiber of my being, my values and my belief system. It absolutely puts its finger on every fear I've ever had. Time to go home. It's easier because though she's loved me and been open to me all of our life, sometimes I've violated that love. Sometimes I've violated that trust. Sometimes I went farther and did things that I should have known violated, said things that I should have known violated, but in my youth and my ignorance did not know it would. And patiently, lovingly, she's always worked herself way back from the edge. She's never said, you're a bad man, I don't like you. But slowly, trust became an issue. Now, she always trusted me. On the surface, she always trusted me. But the things we're talking about in our life now, as we move into our 70s and our 80s, there's more trust in her heart towards me now than there's ever been. It's easy to think you either have a good marriage or a bad marriage. You always have both.
Sure.
That's right.
You always have both.
Absolutely.
You always have things that are dangerously broken, and you have things that need to be sustained and repaired, and you have other parts that are flourishing. You can say, man, the South 40 is underwater. It's a swamp. It's not going to grow anything. Say, yeah, but look at that weed over the North 40. Something's growing. Something's profiting. God's good. He makes the best out of your life that you will allow Him to make. But there's seasons where, for all of it to work, there are relationship issues, key issues, that have to be faced, that have to be addressed, that have to be owned, that have to be talked about. And in the same context that Gene said, you have to have the good faith to listen. Over the course of our life, not just in the last years, but for the last 20 years at least, she said things to me in our private conversations that simply outraged me. And I sat there like I was playing world stakes poker. I never contradicted her. I never raised an eyebrow. I did my best. I mean, it fell on the floor a few times and shook. But by and large, there were not too many tells. Because I knew what kind of courage it took for her to tell me what she really believed, what her dreams really were, what her hopes really were. They weren't always about what was wrong with me. Sometimes they were where she felt like she came up short. It still required me to sit and listen, and I'll try and correct her thought. Those are expensive places to come to. There's work involved. There's responsibility involved. Jesus said that they become one flesh. And just lest you think that sex is the point, He said to the woman at the well, you've had these many husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. There's more to it than a physical act. It's mutual, spiritual engagement. It's soulish, relational. I've said emotional, I'll say it again. engagement.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Jesus
Yeah.
said in these verses that you have to leave and you have to hold fast. Both things are critical. King James Bible used the word cleave. Cleave is a marvelous word. It can mean exactly opposites. It means cut something apart. It means to bind something together, depending strictly on the context. It's expressed in this ESV translation I'm using with the idea of leave and hold fast. The word for leave means to abandon, to forsake. It means you completely turn loose of it. It says you turn loose of it, you let it go, and you hold fast to this relationship. You only have to hold fast to something that's trying to get away from you. You only have to hold fast, to hold tightly to something if it's being violently pulled out of your hands. You don't have to hold fast. I got my car keys in my pocket. I don't have to hold fast to them. They're not going anywhere. But if you try to wrestle them around and get them out of my pocket, get them in my hand, it's a whole different story then. You've got to make a point to say, this is worth hanging on to. This is a treasure. You have to hold fast to the individual that God gave you because God gave you to them because they needed your love. Not just any man's love. They needed your love. And they needed God's love filtered through you to them. And because you needed their love, not just their love, but God's love filtered through you back to them. You have to hold fast to that when life is trying to disrupt it and pull it out of your hands, pull it out of your grasp,
Yes.
when it would be easier to turn it loose and let it go. When it's a lot of trouble to hang on to it. It says, leave, hold fast, culminates in the word cleave, but the Greek word is an old word that was used by medical doctors that means to bind up a wound. You're broken. I'm broken. Jean's broken. It's never a question of who's the more broken. The question is, we're all broken, and somehow the Spirit's job in the entire affair, the part that God actually does, where it said, and God makes them to become one flesh. You cannot make yourself be one flesh.
Yeah.
Where God makes you to become one flesh is where He binds broken piece to broken piece. And eventually, by the life that is in Him, by the life that is in you, you grow together and become one.
Yeah.
It's easier to stop and say, this has gone far enough. It's easier to say, I'm happy enough. It's easier to say that, my marriage is okay. I'm satisfied. My spouse is satisfied. Life's pretty good.
Let's not rock the boat.
Let's not rock the boat. Let's not rock the boat. But the price of it is that the fullness of Christ gets missed in the equation.
Yes, it does.
Because you would never think about coming to church. I hope you wouldn't. I probably have. And say to yourself, my relationship with the Lord's good enough. I'd be afraid He'd hear me. I might think it, but I'm not going to say it. My relationship with the Lord's good enough. I don't need Him to tell me anymore. I don't need Him to communicate anything else to me. I'm perfectly happy with what it is because I know that the minute I buy that, I begin to backslide.
Yep.
I know that the minute I think that I've given Him everything He wants and I've let Him give me everything that He wants to give me, that I've begun to backslide right off. And I know that in my marriage, if I live to be 119, which is not a pleasant thought, but if I live to be 119, that I know that I will have to continue to grow and to change and be changed by the power of God's love in me to bring into my life that which I will not let him say to me directly.
Yeah.
That where I will not let him interfere and intervene in my life. He's my God, he's good, but he's also unseen.
Right.
It's when he begins to move with these seen vessels around me
Right.
that my life is reshaped. And I'm going to tell you frankly, that your church can only become what your church is supposed to be, in fullness and oneness, when the families, when the marriages begin to be knit together. Then the relationships towards pastor, towards congregants, towards workers, towards the community can be life-giving, trustful, faithful relationships with no human agenda, but simply the expression of the purpose and the presence of God. Anybody got any thoughts?
Oh, say that again. Can I ask you something?
You can.
It's been on my mind since you were preaching. I'm saved. I've been saved about 9 years from alcohol, and I'm married to a husband that he's not saved yet. I think God's trying to get his attention, but he's not listening. All right, I'm going to be really frank, and I'm not embarrassed or anything. I feel, thank you, Lord. He's the one that's going to give it through. Me and my husband were just two people in a house.
Yeah.
Existing.
Yeah.
I was really honest a while back, and I said, Lord, I don't love him. I don't feel for him. And he says, love him in the spirit.
Yeah, I'm sure he did.
And a while back, the Lord says he'll heal my marriage, but it's exactly about what you're saying about harden the heart. I feel like God's really shown, don't let the heart harden, right? But it's so hard. The reason why I'm asking this, have you ever spoke with anybody that one person's saved and the other one's not saved?
Yeah. We've got a lady that we worked with, pastored for a while. She's 92 years old. She came to church the entire 4-month period that we pastored down in Woodstock a number of years ago. We've seen her scores of times since. She was always vibrant, filled with hope, but her husband was absolutely antagonistic to the gospel.
He was Dutch.
He was Dutch. frankly, he was chronically Dutch. He was chronically Dutch. He was Dutch and he was glad of it. He wanted to make Canada into Holland West. He was really that Dutch. But at about 90 years of age, he unexpectedly got born again.
Well, what I'm trying to say is, hard, and I'm really open and honest.
That's terrible. That's twice
I
this.
feel like God's really giving me the strength. I spoke with my sister Darlene. There's times I said, I'm going to leave. I feel like saying, well, there's the door. I don't feel for you the way. And I'm going to tell you.
That's greatly overrated.
But you know something? It's amazing, and I feel such a freedom. Thank you, Lord. And I felt like the Lord was speaking to me that when you got married, and we were married, I was 17. I was a little older than you and your wife. And the Lord says, when you got married, it was just based on sex.
Yeah.
And now that I'm saved...
Fortunately, we weren't like that.
No. But it's just, I feel like we're just too strangers.
You know what?
You know what I mean?
Yes.
I won't get to preach the morning.
No.
I give you any pastoral advice, and I shouldn't be able to. But falling in love as a motivating factor, even being in love, saying you don't love somebody, is not the crime of the century. I don't know. I told somebody recently that you'd probably fall, even in your marriage, you'd probably fall in and out of love a half a dozen times over the course of your life. Yeah. There'd be sometimes you were closer, sometimes you were farther apart for lots of reasons. That's not really the point. What the point is the decision to do it.
That's right.
That's the decision. One day she had to make a decision she was going to love me. One day I had to make a decision I was going to love her. Later on she had to make a decision she'd let me love her. I had to make a decision I'd let her love me. It was coming.